Ryan Croy Dragon, and welcome to the repeat of day 2 of our journey through Rome. That must be done on account of BBC blocking the previous one when the previous stream when I transferred it to YouTube. We'll begin in just a bit. So, how's everyone doing? Are we all good? We'll begin in a moment, so just everyone take it easy. Go get a snack. So the basic plan for today is to not watch the clip from I, Claudius. That way, the stream won't be blocked when I upload it to YouTube. The Emperor. Generals, administrators, philosophers, madmen. In the 500 years of the Empire, such men ruled Rome. The Emperor was always the supreme commander of the military and the first citizen of the Empire. And before long his title also included Master. The name slaves used to address their owners. Emperors like Nero even declared themselves gods, but whether god or just master, the emperor held the power of life and death over every citizen of the empire. The ironic thing about Nero, declaring himself a god is that he was never deified after his death. One could say it's funny. The longest I'll go today is at least until 3:30. a laurel for a crown. Most Romans considered it bad taste to show off too much in public by wearing extravagant clothes and jewelry. Wise emperors knew that to keep the respect of the people and to carry on tradition, they should behave with dignity. Much of the time, emperors didn't wear a lavish golden crown. They settled for just a simple garland of laurel leaves. A symbol of power. Ancient statues and coins often show emperors wearing a laurel crown, a sign of imperial power and military victories. It was a lot like the garland of olive branches that Olympic champions wore in ancient Greece. And given the amount of imitation of Greece and Rome, I wonder if that's where it came from originally. Just give me a moment here. The color of power. Purple was the most expensive color in ancient times. The best purple dye came from the ground-up shells of the murex, a snail that lived in the Mediterranean Sea. Purple was so rare and costly that it became a symbol of wealth and power in Rome. Senators showed their status by wearing togas with a purple stripe. Later, the emperor wore clothes made entirely of purple cloth. Anyone else dressed completely in the imperial color could be condemned for high treason. You look divine. Purple is still a color of distinction. It is worn by cardinals and bishops in the Roman Catholic Church. And yet I can only remember one instance of Cardinal Richelieu being portrayed wearing purple. On screen. I believe it was in Richard Lester's two-part adaptation of The Three Musketeers, where Richelieu was played by Charlton Heston. Granted, Charlton Heston was 10 years older than Richelieu was at the time. But on the other hand, Richelieu was described by Alexandre Dumas as looking older than he actually was. So there is that point. Yeah, that's really the best Richard Lester's screen adaptation, two-part screen adaptation. It's really the most faithful. You should see it if you are a fan of The Three Musketeers and the D'Artagnan romances in general. Emperors gone mad. At first, the Emperor Nero seemed harmless. He entered singing contests and athletic competitions, which as emperor he always won. But Nero grew suspicious and had his mother, wives, and step-brother killed. By the time a raging fire destroyed much of Rome in 64 AD, everyone knew he was insane. As the flames consumed the city, Nero sang about the fall of Troy. Later he declared himself a god and erected a towering bronze statue of himself. A day at the beach. Perhaps the craziest emperor was Caligula. He once led soldiers on a campaign to conquer the ocean. To prove his victory, he ordered his troops to collect seashells. Now, last time when we went through this, I said it was possible that Caligula might have been Nero's father due to the fact that, well, Caligula and his sister Agrippina Minor, who was the mother of Nero, had relations. But then again, Caligula had relations with every one of his sisters and then prostituted them, so for all we know, Nero could be anyone's son. But I'm not gonna promote such a theory. It's like that theory that Commodus was the son of a gladiator that Faustina Minor had a affair with. It makes good entertainment, but as a serious theory, it's not much. Yes, sir, it's not much indeed as a serious theory. I would like to see the film The Fall of the Roman Empire in its entirety, though. Deathbed deity. Even being an emperor wasn't enough for some rulers. They expected to be honored as gods. Some were content to know they would be worshipped after they died, but others couldn't wait and declared themselves gods while they were alive. Only the most despised rulers, men like Caligula and Nero, were denied the honor. Eternal home. Romans built spectacular temples to honor some of their deified leaders. The temple for Augustus and Livia was built in what is now France, so that citizens there could worship the first emperor and his wife. There's a mistake in the film Barabbas. Good movie, but it's a notable mistake that Tiberius is referred to as the divine Tiberius, or some such thing by a Roman guard, even though, as I just read, emperors were not deified until after they died. And as is the case with Tiberius's great-nephew and great-great-nephew, he was not deified after he died. In fact, if I remember my history correctly, the Romans wanted to throw his body into the Tiber River. So of course that's not exactly a sign that he'd be considered divine. Of course, whether his death was due to natural causes or assassination is up for debate, but the mainstream belief is that he died of natural causes, with some saying that Caligula killed him and someone else. I can't remember the name. Granted, in the death of Julia Augusta, which I wrote, I portray Tiberius as having been killed by Caligula, but that's for dramatic purposes, and even then we don't see his death because it is mentioned in the final chapter. Heads and tails. Most citizens of the empire never saw their emperors, unless they traveled to Rome to see the imperial statues and temples. The only idea of what the rulers looked like came from coins. The emperor's face appeared on every official coin. Today, the money left behind by soldiers and traders tell archaeologists when and where Romans traveled. Face value. Roman leaders showed their power by issuing coins, but financial problems often forced them to lessen the value of the empire's coins. The coin bearing the emperor's face often became thinner and lighter, as emperors emptied Rome's treasury to pay for more soldiers. A few good men. The first emperor Augustus set a standard that later emperors admired but rarely achieved. Augustus put an end to decades of civil war and turmoil. He built gleaming new temples and monuments in Rome, but lived simply. The reluctant Emperor Claudius was probably smarter than he seemed. Forced to take the throne when soldiers murdered Caligula, he surrounded himself with able advisors and expanded the empire's wealth and power. Constantine the Great. 3 centuries after the first emperors ruled, Constantine reunited the empire divided by Diocletian. He fought for years to restore Rome's power. Today he is remembered as the emperor who made Christianity the official state religion, and as the founder of the empire's new capital of Constantinople. A modern portrait. No one knows what Claudius was really like. Some experts think a childhood illness left him with a limp, a nervous tic, and a stutter. Others say Claudius was a clever man who hid his intelligence from the evil and suspicious Emperor Caligula. And I will not be I will not be pulling up that video file because, well, I do not want this blocked by the BBC. In Canada, the United States of America, the United Kingdom, and Ireland. family life. Nothing was more important to the Romans than the family. Even when emperors ruled Rome, the father, not the state, had absolute authority over his wife and children. Romans respected their ancestors and wanted more than anything to continue their family name by having successful sons. The home, whether a cramped apartment in Rome or a comfortable villa in the country, was the family's most important place of worship. It was also school for some wealthy children, and for everyone it was a sanctuary from the outside world. Pets. Rome was a dangerous city full of thieves. Some people kept guard dogs chained to their front doors. In the country, wealthy landowners prized their packs of good hunting dogs, and Roman ladies often had favorite little lap dogs. Cats weren't kept as pets, but with so much grain around to attract mice and rats, they came in handy. Of course, sometimes cats got a little out of hand, as this mosaic from Pompeii shows. Dog tag. Dogs often wore bronze identity tags inscribed with the name of their owner and instructions on how to return the dog to its owner should it get lost. The more things change, the more they stay the same. An unhappy family. The Emperor Septimius Severus tried to make sure his sons Caracalla and Geta would share power after he died, but Caracalla wanted to rule by himself, so he had Geta murdered, right in front of their mother. He ordered Geta's name erased from monuments, and he executed anyone he thought had supported his brother. But Romans came to hate Caracalla so much that army officers finally assassinated him in 217 AD. Portraits like this one showing Caracalla were defaced. Dress code. Caracalla's name comes from the Latin word for a coat he had seen in Germany when he was a boy. When he became emperor, Caracalla tried to make everyone stop wearing togas and don la Caracalla. Ironically, he still ended up being deified after he was murdered. Then again, he might not have been as bad as Caligula. A Roman wedding. Many Roman followers arranged their children's marriages for financial or political reasons. Although marriage was an important institution, the ceremony was usually simple. The bride wore a special dress and a red hat and red shoes. After making sacrifices to the gods, the bride and groom joined hands and exchanged vows. Then the bride followed a procession to her new husband's home. From that time forward, a bride came under her husband's absolute authority. Don't trip. A modern wedding custom started in ancient Rome. A husband carried his new bride through the doorway of his home. Legend said that if he didn't and the bride tripped on her way in, the marriage would be an unhappy one. Household gods. Although Romans had many public religious festivals, The most important rites were performed each day to honor Vesta, the goddess of the hearth, and the gods of the home and of ancestors. Romans believed that one god in the form of a snake protected the house. Daily offerings of wine or food at the family shrine honored gods like the Lar and the spirit of the ancestors, like the Lar, the spirit of the ancestors, and the Genius, and Juno, who protected the father and mother. A special role. Children often took part in rituals at the Larium, a small shrine where the family could leave offerings and say prayers. At home with the Romans. Most Romans lived in small apartments or homes with little furniture or other comforts. Typical Roman A typical Roman's day began at dawn, when the children scurried off to school and the father, if he was lucky enough to have a job, left for work. Many women spent their days fetching water, weaving cloth, and preparing food. The day's activities usually ended at sunset. The Romans had oil lamps and candles, but they were smelly, expensive, and dangerous. Click the button to take a closer look at a daily life in Rome, and just wait one moment as I pull up the video file.
What was life like for people in the Roman Empire? The things they left behind give us a good idea. For example, do you know what ancient Romans ate? These large ovens tell us they must have baked a lot of bread. And this well-preserved meal of walnuts, bread, figs, and eggs shows us they enjoyed lots of other food. Romans liked life's finer things too. Archaeologists still find fancy gold and silver jewelry in towns from all over the ancient empire. They also surrounded themselves with art, like here in this magnificent public bath. But the most popular entertainment was at the amphitheater, where crowds watched wild animal hunts and saw gladiators fight to the death.
Building feats. What did Rome look like in ancient times? Augustus said he had found a city made of bricks and left one made of marble. But even after his ambitious building projects, Rome wasn't all gleaming monuments and magnificent temples. Much of the city was crammed with wooden and brick apartment buildings. After the Great Fire of 64 AD, Imperial Rome really took shape, with armies of engineers and city planners. Emperor after emperor added more public baths, arenas, theaters, temples, forums, and triumphal arches. the Pantheon. A temple dedicated to all the gods had to be really spectacular. So the Romans made the Pantheon in the shape of a huge circular dome more than 43 meters in diameter, one of the largest ever built. To make the dome as light as possible, the builders used a special concrete made with lightweight volcanic rock. The practical Romans left a large hole in the ceiling to let light enter the building, and they installed drains to catch rainwater that fell through it. Still standing. The Pantheon still looks much like it did in ancient times. It's one of the few temples that hasn't fallen into ruin, a testimony to the Roman builders' skill and to the respect with which many generations of admirers have treated the building. The Colosseum. The outside of the Colosseum was once decorated with arches and statues, but inside it was one of the most practical buildings in Rome. Hidden arches supported tiers of seats for the crowds and formed 80 exits called vomitoria, because the crowd could gush out through them so quickly. Beneath the smooth sand of the arena floor, a maze of passages, cages, sounds, and mechanical lifts allowed workers to get gladiators and animals up and out onto the floor, sometimes through hidden trapdoors. Good seats. The Colosseum might be considered one of the world's first domed stadiums. Wooden masts held a canvas screen that protected spectators from the sun. All roads lead to Rome. Good roads served Rome long before the city became the capital of an empire. By 312 BC, the oldest and most famous road, the Via Appia, already connected to Rome to other cities. Eventually, the Roman road system ran for more than 85,000 kilometers, from Persia to Spain. Many roads were built by and for the army, which used them to travel to battles all over the Mediterranean world. Carefully constructed, the roads were designed to withstand heavy traffic and to drain quickly after rainstorms. Road work. With only basic tools and a lot of hard labor, soldiers and slaves made a level roadbed, added gravel for drainage, and then used stone to build a smooth surface. Roads varied width from about 3 meters to nearly 8 meters. Roman innovations. The Romans didn't invent the arch, but they certainly improved on it and put it to good use. Roman engineers created soaring triumphal gates, colossal public baths, huge amphitheaters, and long aqueducts and bridges by using different types of arches. Some arches were just for show, like the Arch of Septimius Severus, built in 203 AD, which rises nearly 21 meters. Other arches did their work out of sight, like those holding up tiers of seats in buildings like the Colosseum. Bridging the Tiber. At the famous Milvian Bridge, Constantine defeated Maxentius, his rival, and took control of the entire empire. The bridge, restored at least twice, still crosses the Tiber River today. A borrowed style. There's a lot of ancient Greek culture in Rome. Because Romans so admired the Greeks, they often copied basic Greek designs, such as those used in the magnificent Parthenon, especially when they built a temple or government building. But to make their work more distinctive, the Romans changed many details. They even put temples on pedestals to make them look more imposing. For other buildings, Romans followed designs that took advantage of concrete and the arch to create new shapes. Which is rich? Can you tell which of these buildings is an ancient temple? Both are based on a basic Greek design, but one was dedicated to the Emperor Augustus and his wife Livia. The Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. was built nearly 2,000 years later. A day at the theater. With arches and concrete, Roman builders erected huge theaters to host a popular form of entertainment. Plays. Thousands of people could watch slapstick farces and the occasional serious play. Unlike the Greeks, the Romans closed off the space behind the stage with fancy backdrops that often looked like house fronts or street fronts, complete with statues, paintings, decorated columns, and doors for the actors to make their entrances and exits. Good show. Roman theater builders tried to make their buildings as comfortable and practical as possible. The steep rows of seats and the wall behind the stage helped carry the actors' voices to the top rows. Some theaters had roofs, others had canvas shades to protect the audience from the hot afternoon sun. A day at the Colosseum. The Romans were remarkable builders. Many of the roads, viaducts, and walls they constructed still stand today, but perhaps the most impressive work is the Colosseum in Rome. It held 50,000 spectators, had a vast maze of tunnels and cages, and even offered a few comforts such as a system to spray the audience with cool mist or water on hot days. Click the play button to see what it was like to spend a day at the Colosseum. Yeah, unfortunately we can't because that video file appears to be missing. Yeah, I'm not exactly sure where it is. So, carrying on. Life of a gladiator. Some gladiators were admired like movie stars or sports heroes are today. Young women even left love notes to them scrawled on the walls of Pompeii. But a gladiator's life really wasn't glamorous. Captured in war or dragged from prison, gladiators were bought and sold like racehorses. After enduring brutal training, they went off to fight and die, not to protect their homelands or conquer new territory, but to entertain the crowds. In reality, death wasn't really that common. It did happen, but not as often as we think. An iron suit. They looked like armored knights, but Roman gladiators really weren't well protected. Their helmets, shields, and greaves were mostly for show. Arms, legs, chests, and stomachs were left open to attack. After all, death was the goal of the games, and officials didn't want to make it too difficult to please the crowds. Actually, the goal of the games was blood, death not so much. Who's who? Gladiators wore different types of armor. A big, strong Murmello, or Samnite, carried a large shield and sword, and wore a helmet. A Retiarius depended on speed, quickness, and a three-pronged spear. This one again. A Retiarius depended on speed, quickness, a three-pronged spear, and a net to trip his opponents. Thracian fighters carried small round shields and curved, wickedly sharp swords. Earned freedom. A gladiator's life didn't always end in the arena. After surviving many contests, a gladiator could buy his freedom with money earned in victories. Others, having proved themselves in many fights, became instructors in gladiator schools. These lucky few were often given discharge tickets, bones inscribed with their names, or just simple wooden swords to show that they were free to leave the arena forever. Good show. According to legend, the crowd had a lot to say about whether a wounded gladiator lived to fight another day. Supposedly, the crowd gestured with their thumbs to vote for death or mercy. We now know that mercy was the thumb in, to represent a sheathed sword. The bloody arena. Everything about a Roman amphitheater, like the Colosseum, was cleverly designed to keep the action going and the crowd entertained. Dozens of gates made it easy to get in and out for the spectators. Trapdoors and hidden entrances made sure fresh performers, gladiators, beasts, or helpless unarmed victims could appear suddenly and be quickly carried off after they were killed. The arena sand was even dyed red to conceal the pools of blood. Everybody comfy? The Colosseum had a huge shade to protect spectators from the sun. Mists of cool, perfumed water sometimes sprayed the crowd to cut both the afternoon heat and the stench of freshly killed men and animals. Hand-to-hand combat. Everyone knew a gladiator fight would end with one man dead, or at least terribly wounded. So to help keep the action interesting, officials made sure the fighters were well matched. A heavily armed, strong, but slow Samnite or Murmello usually faced a lightly armed Thracian or Retiarius, men whom survival depended on agility and speed. Swords and claws. The combat in the arena wasn't always between men. For a variety, gladiators sometimes hunted down lions or tigers. The crowd was just as happy if the animals won. These contests were called ventions. War games. The Colosseum was so big it could even host a naval battle. It was sometimes flooded so that ships full of condemned criminals and gladiators could fight for the pleasure of the crowds. Ships were also put on wheels and sailed around the arena to add variety to ordinary games. Emperors knew clones. Watching gladiator fights wasn't entertaining enough for the Emperor Commodus. He had a good time and shocked the Roman crowds by fighting in the arena himself. Of course, he never lost. A Hollywood legend. Gladiators came from all over the world, and they had to be trained in the Roman ways of fighting. The Romans invented ingenious ways to train new gladiators. Practice had to be brutal enough to teach, but not to kill. At least not too often. Gladiators were too valuable to damage unless a large and appreciative audience was watching. Click the play button to see a Hollywood Click the play button to see how Hollywood recreated a gladiator training camp. Now this is a clip from Barabbas. Coming up. Excellent movie. Oops. A world of many gods. The Romans found gods everywhere. Protective spirits watched over every house, and families honored them daily at special shrines. Mighty gods of the sky, earth, and sea, imported from Greece, were now worshipped in magnificent temples built in Rome. On the empire's frontiers, soldiers and traders learned about strange barbarian gods and mysterious deities that promised eternal life to those who learned their sometimes wild and secret rites. Adopted gods. The Olympian gods of the Greeks didn't fade away along with the glory of Athens. Zeus, Arena, Athena, and other gods lived on as part of the official Roman religion. These borrowed gods were given new Latin names like Jupiter, Mars, and Minerva. Of course, the new gods were just copies of the old ones because the Romans had... Of course, the new gods weren't just copies of the old ones, because the Romans had their own myths and legends, but Jupiter still wielded thunderbolts and Mars was just as warlike as Ares. And sometimes less important gods like Pan, the half-man, half-goat god of shepherds, kept their deities, even their Greek names. State symbols. Even after many Romans stopped believing in old gods like Mercury, they still had to make sacrifices at the temples. To help maintain tradition and order, emperors often restored old temples and built new homes for the Roman gods. Gods from abroad. For many Romans, the state religion's serious rituals, official feasts, and holidays weren't enough. They looked for answers in mysterious religions from the East. These cults had many secret ceremonies that only the faithful were allowed to see. One cult, especially popular with soldiers, worshipped Mithras, an ancient Persian god of light and truth. Legend said that Mithras had killed a bull, and that its blood gave life to all the universe. His followers believed that Mithras had conquered death and could bring them eternal life. Earth Goddess. Some of the wildest rites were celebrated by worshippers of the goddess Cybele. Her followers believed that she cured disease and helped crops grow. They became so excited at ceremonies honoring Cybele that they sometimes mutilated themselves and bathed in blood from sacrificed bones or sheep. The persecuted. The Romans usually didn't bother people who practiced other religions. In fact, the Romans often adopted new gods and religious rites from people all over the empire. But the followers of two religions, Judaism and Christianity, disobeyed emperor after emperor. They refused to make sacrifices to the official state gods and wouldn't recognize the emperor himself as a god. To the Romans, such defiance was a crime, and in the empire, the penalty for such crimes would be death. Battle of Realms. For more than 300 years, Rome battled Jews and Christians. The Arch of Titus celebrated the emperor's capture and destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD. Many defiant Christians met their end in the empire's arena, mauled to death by beasts. The persecutions finally ended when Constantine made Christianity the official religion of the empire. Vestal Virgins. One of the most sacred sites in the empire was the circular sanctuary of the goddess Vesta in Rome. Inside, 6 priestesses called the Vestal Virgins tended a sacred flame and protected a statue of Pallas Athena. Legend said that if the flame went out, or if the statue was destroyed, Rome would crumble into ruins. Each spring, the Vestal Virgins renewed the sacred flame. They participated in many official ceremonies and even safeguarded realms and treaties. In fact, they were held in such respect that if a criminal being led to punishment met a Vestal Virgin on the street, he was set free. Sacred Duty. Serving as a priestess to Vesta was a high honor. During the empire, the emperor selected girls 6 to 10 years old, usually from Rome's best families. They lived and worked alone at the sanctuary for 30 years. State religion. The emperor wasn't just Rome's commander-in-chief. He was also the emperor's chief priest. He was also the empire's chief priest, the Pontifex Maximus. Emperors like Augustus believed that religious traditions and sacrifices to the old gods maintained order and reminded citizens of their duty and the government's authority over them. In every family, the all-powerful father also maintained the old traditions. He supervised the daily rites at the household shrine that honored the gods of the home and family. Feasts and festivals. The official Roman religion wasn't just a lot of solemn ceremonies. Romans enjoyed at least one holiday almost every month, often celebrating with games, athletic contests, or a feast, for example, in May. For example, in May, merchants and traders honored the god Mercury, and the Saturnalia in December honored the god Saturn, and was one of the happiest times of the year. Growing up in Rome. Even in a strict Roman society, women were Even in the strict Roman society, children were allowed a few years to play with dolls, wooden animals, and other toys, but soon they had to prepare for adulthood. In Rome, many children went to school for at least a few years. Girls usually finished their schooling and were thought ready for marriage by age 12. Boys often continued their education under the stern guidance of their fathers and teachers. However, most children, being from poor families, had to go to work as soon as they were able. A father's right. The paterfamilias. The father in a Roman family was an absolute ruler who owned all the family's property. He had the same authority over his wife and children that a master had over slaves. He could reject any baby presented to him by his wife and order that it be left to die. He could even sell his sons and daughters into slavery. His father's son. Even after he stopped wearing a boy's toga and the bola charm of youth, a young man remained under his father's authority. Only when his father died did a son gain his full legal rights. School. At about age 7, many boys and girls started school. The school day began at dawn. Students spent hours taking dictation, discussing literature, and trying to avoid being ripped by the teacher. Most girls left school after learning only the basics of reading and writing. Then they stayed home to learn cooking and sewing, so that they would become good wives and mothers. Fathers always made sure their sons learned the two most important skills for a Roman man: how to use a soldier's weapons and how to speak in public. A life in the law. Lucky boys continued their schooling by studying law and assisting a senator or another government official. Others learned from a grammaticus, a professor. Wealthy families often provided Greek tutors for their sons because Greek culture was deeply admired and Greek was an international language. Toys and games. Like kids from every place and time, Roman children enjoyed toys and games. They played with marbles, dolls, wooden animals, and balls. Toy chariots must have been especially valuable playthings. The two favorite board games in Rome were called Little Robbers, a game like chess, and 12 Lines, which was something like backgammon. Children must have loved their toys very much, because if they died, they were often buried with a favorite doll or toy. Toxic toy. This toy, Camel, looks like fun, but it's made of lead, which we now know is poisonous, especially to children.
The rich and the poor. Only wealthy Romans lived in villas and beautiful townhouses like those that tourists can visit today at Pompeii. Most people could afford only a shabby apartment in a large crowded building. Apartment buildings were always in danger of collapsing or catching fire, and without the convenience of running water, even everyday tasks became back-breaking labor. Life of leisure. The daughter of a senator could look forward to a life of luxury. She would probably marry a powerful man and enjoy life in upper-class Roman society. Healing the sick. Like most people in the ancient world, the Romans believed curses, angry gods, and evil spirits brought disease. Although they had doctors, Romans usually sought curses from the gods of healing, like Aesculapius. Only the rich could afford treatments from the learned Greek physicians brought to Rome. Skilled military surgeons treated soldiers wounded in battle, but they didn't serve ordinary citizens. Of course, considering the cures that doctors offered, many common people were better off trusting in the gods. Surgical tools. Roman surgeons had all kinds of tools, just like modern doctors. In fact, their scalpels, tweezers, probes, and saws weren't all that different from today's basic medical instruments. But Roman doctors poked, cut, and prodded without many painkillers. They had nothing to treat infections, and surgery must have been a terrifying and painful ordeal. This may hurt. Military surgeons probably offered some of the best medical care in Rome. They removed arrowheads, repaired deep battle wounds, and amputated crushed arms and legs. Amulets and magic charms. To make sure their prayers were answered, anxious people left offerings at the temples of healing gods like Aesculapius. These votive offerings, often shaped like the part of the body that was sick, reminded the god to heal an infected ear or a weak leg. Romans also wore amulets, magic charms, and rings to please the gods and ward off danger. Just like the ancient Egyptians and Greeks. In fact, this tradition continues in many cultures even today. Charmed childhood. Roman boys and girls wore a special bolla charm to protect them from disease and danger. Boys often wore the charm, usually round or heart-shaped, until they were about 14. Girls wore the bolla until they got married, which was sometimes as early as 12. A healing god. The Romans got most of their physicians and their most important god of healing, Aesculapius, from Greek. They believed Aesculapius could heal those who slept in his sacred temple, and dreamed of a cure. After a plague in 293 BC, the Romans built a temple to Aesculapius on the insula Tiberina, an island in the Tiber River. Legend says that a snake sacred to Aesculapius and brought from Greece chose the island as the site for the new temple. It eventually became one of the first public hospitals. Greek heritage. Aesculapius is the Latin spelling of the name of the Greek god of healing, Asclepius. Centuries before the Romans built their temples in the Tiber River, the Greeks worshipped Asclepius at the temple in Epidaurus. Powerful plants. Many Roman medicines came from plants. Writers like Pliny the Elder explained how hundreds of herbs and other plants could cure sickness or help keep people healthy. Doctors prepared ointment and drugs from sage, fennel, rosemary, and many other plants that today we mostly use for cooking, including cabbage. A healthy dose. Roman soldiers got a daily ration of garlic to help keep them healthy. Today, many people take garlic pills for the same reason. A visit to the doctor. For a long time, Rome didn't have any doctors. But by about 100 BC, wealthy Romans started bringing Greek physicians to the city. Although most physicians were men, Rome had some women doctors and midwives. They used herbs, wine, plant sap, and medicines made from animal parts to treat eye infections, snake bites, skin problems, and hundreds of other diseases. Today, no one knows how often they really cured people. In fact, the writer Pliny the Elder said, "A physician is the only person licensed to kill." Open wide. Roman dentists even made false teeth. They probably attached real teeth to a metal frame that fit inside the mouth. House and home. Most Romans lived in cramped, dark apartment buildings called insulae. But life was more pleasant for wealthy citizens. They could afford a dormus, a single family house. A dormus usually had an atrium, an open court with a small pool that caught rainwater and helped cool the house. The lorarium, the sacred family shrine, was also kept there. Most houses were small, but they often had a few bedrooms, a dining room, and perhaps a study. Household wares. Like most people in ancient times, Romans used pottery to store and cook food. They also had bronze and iron knives, strainers, bowls, and cups. But unlike the Egyptians or Greeks, the Romans also had a lot of glass. They had learned how to blow glass instead of using molds, so it became much less expensive and easier to make into many useful shapes. Don't drop it. Basic glass jars and bottles wouldn't do it for rich Romans. They showed off by serving guests from fancy glass bowls and vases. Sometimes the glass had bands of gold and silver inside. The library. Wealthy Romans could show off by having a lot of slaves and hosting lavish banquets, but a private library full of Latin and Greek literature was the mark of a cultured family. Educated people, or at least those who wanted to seem educated, kept copies of books by Rome's great writers. Scrolls of poetry by Virgil and Horace and histories by Tacitus were some of the things every educated Roman read. Dear Diary. Some Romans wrote letters, essays, and memoirs. Upper-class men and women tried to perfect the arts of witty, elegant writing and speaking. Indoor plumbing. Rome's aqueducts brought the city millions of tons of water every day, but only a few people had indoor plumbing. Private baths, like those found in some homes in Pompeii, were usually luxuries for the rich. People who lived in big apartment blocks had to use public toilets and collected water from their neighborhood fountains. See you at the club. Even people with fancy bathrooms probably visited the public baths. The baths were a good place to meet others, do a little business, and relax. In fact, to stay popular, emperors often cancelled the admission charge and declared the baths free for the day. Painted walls. The beautiful wall paintings and mosaics in upper-class Roman homes weren't just pretty decorations. Garden scenes and landscapes also made the small rooms in most houses seem large. Some people displayed scenes from mythology or portraits of their important ancestors. Today, there are wall decorations like these scenes showing a bakery and some musicians tell us a lot about how the Romans lived. Art to walk on. Some Roman houses had fancy floors too. Skilled artisans created intricate designs and portraits with pieces of colored stone. Cosmetic counter. A well-to-do woman had many cosmetics to give her the pale complexion that Romans considered fashionable. She also used lipstick, rouge, and shadow to add attractive accents. Hairstyles were important too, and women made their slaves spend hours creating fancy curls and tall, impressive hairdos. Women especially liked wigs made of blonde or red haircut from barbarian prisoners. Just a trim. Men were careful about their appearance, too, although they thought it unmanly to spend too much time primping. It took a lot of courage to visit Roman barbers. Using a dull razor, they scraped off a beard without using shaving lotion or oil. And that would be the phone, so I'll be right back. Okay, carrying on. Lighting the ray. In ancient Rome, almost no one went out after sunset, except thieves or rich people who took a lot of slaves along for protection. Since there weren't any street lights, cities like Rome were dark and dangerous. But even when they were safe in their homes, most Romans probably didn't stay up long after dark. They usually had only a few lamps that burned olive oil or perhaps some candles made from animal fat. Neither gave much light, and in crowded apartment blocks, these lamps always threatened to start a fire. Unhealthy glow. Of course, wealthy Romans could afford lots of fuel and beautiful lamps to use it in. But even they probably didn't keep their lamps going too long. Burning olive oil smelled awful and left smoky stains on the ceiling.
The legacy of Rome. The Roman Empire ended in the West in 476 AD, but the Roman way of life didn't disappear when the barbarians took over. Eventually, Latin evolved into modern languages such as French and Italian. Old temples like the Pantheon became Christian churches, and some Roman laws, customs, and stories endured. Even the names of the months and of the planets of the solar system have come down to us from ancient Rome. The Amazing Arch. Roman engineers combined the arch with concrete to create amazing new buildings. Round areas like the Colosseum and temples with domes like the Pantheon, long after many of the empire's greatest monuments had fallen into ruins, Roman aqueducts and bridges remained in use, proof of the brilliant design and sturdy construction. In fact, many modern bridges, sports stadiums, and churches are built with arches, much like those developed in ancient Rome. The shape of victory. Roman arches were strong, practical, and beautiful. Emperors often celebrated their military victories by building arches that they could march through in triumph. This famous arch celebrated the conquest of Septimius Severus. Gifts from the past. You might not realize it, but many things we use every day come to us from the ancient world. See if you can match the following discoveries or advances with the cultures they came from. Yeah, this is a game and we can't actually play it, so carrying on, but we'll be seeing the results in just a bit. The answers in just a bit. The Pantheon. Temple, church, and fortress. The Pantheon has been all these things since it was finished during the glory days of the Roman Empire. The Emperor Hadrian dedicated it to all the gods. During the Christian era, the Pantheon became a church, and later it was used as a fortress. Today it is one of the best preserved reminders of Rome's noble past. Rising from the ashes. The Pantheon's dome is constructed of concrete that was made from light volcanic stone. Ironically, just a few years before Hadrian finished the temple, the city of Pompeii had been buried under volcanic ash that later hardened into the same kind of stone. I'm pretty sure Pompeii was during Titus's reign, so that might be an error there. And here are the answers. The atom from Greece, the arch from Rome, blown glass from Phoenicia, paper from Egypt, and 60 minutes from Mesopotamia.
Caesar's calendar. The old Roman calendar had only 10 months beginning in March and ending in December. To keep the seasons in order, the Romans had to add a special month during the last week of February. But eventually, even this system didn't work. And like a watch that's running too fast, the Roman calendar was soon 3 months ahead. A simple solution. To straighten out the seasons, Julius Caesar adopted the Egyptian solar calendar. He added some days to shorter months and inserted a single day into February. The new system worked very well. It was used in Europe until 1582 and is the basis for our modern calendar. In fact, the names of months such as July, August, September, and October are Roman. This would be the month of Octavius then. Wordsworth. Whenever the Romans conquered new territory, the people living there learned Latin so they could do business with the empire. Of course, they didn't learn the Latin of poets and kings. They picked up the vernacular in Latin of the common soldiers and merchants they met. After the empire fell, these local dialects, mixed with barbarian tongues, developed into modern languages such as French, Spanish, and Italian. Still, many words in modern languages like English come from Latin. So if you know what these two words mean, elephantis, applaudo, elephant, applaud, don't even need to bring up the audio file. Now I know my ABCs. The alphabet used in many modern languages is almost identical to the ancient Roman alphabet. The modern alphabets just have a few more letters. Stargazing. In ancient times, people knew... And phone. I'll be right back. In ancient times, people knew about only the planets they could see with the naked eye. The Romans counted 7 planets in all, including the sun and the moon. Because they didn't have telescopes, they knew little about other planets. Many people sought out astrologers to interpret the movements of the planets through the sky. Today, we still use the names of ancient Roman gods to name the planets: Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. Uranus is actually Greek. His Roman name is Caelus. The Roman legions. Bright red tunics, shiny armor, brilliant shields, gleaming spears and swords, and metal fittings clinking out the beat of men precisely in step. For centuries, these signals and sounds could mean only one thing. The Roman army was on the march. Created during the Republic and expanded under the Empire, Rome's legions were the world's first truly professional fighting force. The best equipped and most rigorously trained army the world had ever known. A soldier's life. Like the soldiers in another great ancient fighting force, the Spartan army, Roman legionnaires led a tough, hard life. Soldiers often served for 20 years or more, marching to the ends of the known world. On their backs, they carried almost everything necessary to build roads, forts, and camps along the way. In fact, their best weapons sometimes were their picks and spades, tools that helped them build fortified camps overnight and hold out in enemy territory longer than the enemy itself. Marius's mules. A typical Roman soldier carried up to 40 kilograms of weapons, tools, and equipment. Even with such a load, legionnaires had to march up to 30 kilometers each day. Foot soldiers earned the nickname Marius's Mules after the general who reorganized the Republican army. Changing strategies. The Roman army wasn't always the best equipped and organized fighting force. At first, men had to supply their own weapons, from spears and swords to rocks and clubs. Later, during the early Republic, the army was divided into legions with manipons, handfuls of soldiers organized by the types of weapons they carried. Box formations of tough hastati carrying spears filled the first rank, followed by princeps and triarii, who moved in after the enemy's formation was weakened by the hastati's spears. A new approach. A general named Marius later reorganized the legion so that it could maneuver quickly. A centurion and an optio commanded each century of 80 men, which in turn formed cohorts, the backbone of the new legion. All soldiers had the same weapons and trained, making the legion a better organized and more efficient force. And training made the legion a better organized and more efficient force. Yeah, sorry. believe that's right. I think I might have said trained before. Among the ranks, Rome's armies weren't made up only of professional citizen soldiers. Auxiliary troops recruited from the provinces fought alongside legionnaires. The extra troops weren't as well paid as the professionals, and they didn't get the best equipment or training. But some auxiliary troops were excellent horsemen and archers. Their special skills helped the regular legions win many important battles. If they lived to finish their duty, auxiliaries received an important prize: Roman citizenship. A band of brothers. The carvings on Trajan's column show that many types of soldiers, including musicians, marched off to battle for the empire. The column, built to celebrate Trajan's victories, has carvings of thousands of soldiers and has helped experts understand how the Roman army was organized. Dressed to kill. From the top of his polished helmet to the studs on his tough sandals, a Roman foot soldier was equipped like a human tank. Metal armor protected his chest and abdomen. Metal greaves protected his legs from enemy blades. And a helmet broke the blows a shield failed to stop. Even his belt, with its heavy leather and metal fittings, offered some protection. Underneath, a tunic kept the sharp edges of the soldier's own armor from cutting into his skin. Present arms. Present arms. Each soldier had a scabbard to hold his gladius, a short two-edged sword. The sword was designed for close combat. Some soldiers also carried another sword, or a spear. Weapons of war. Spears and swords were the basic weapons of many ancient armies, and the Romans had some of the best in the world. The iron-tipped spear called the pilum punched through enemy shields and became bent, hindering the enemy soldier. The short two-edged gladius was just right for slashing at opponents in vicious hand-to-hand combat. Even a shield could be a weapon. Roman soldiers used their shields like bulldozer blades to break up enemy formations. Heavy artillery. Rome's arsenal also included huge crossbows and catapults that could hurl arrows, stones, and flaming bombs over an enemy camp's walls. With such weapons, the legions besieged the fortress of Masada. An officer or a gentleman. The Roman army wasn't just the best equipped of its time, it was also the best organized. Every man had a specific job, and orders flowed through a detailed chain of command. A legatus a governor, commanded the legions stationed in his province. Within a legion itself, centurions led each century of 80 to 100 men. A signifier carried the legion's fancy emblem, and a tesserarius made sure the legionnaires knew the daily password to get past the centuries. Noble duty. A young man from the upper class who wanted to win high political office had to serve about 10 years or fight in 10 campaigns as a tribune. Tribunes usually commanded a cohort, a unit of about 600 men. Making music. Music was a big part of Roman festivals, dinner parties, the theatre, and the games at the Colosseum. Bands played horns and pipes and bashed cymbals together. At some religious ceremonies, priestesses shook sistrums and chanted. But upper-class Romans thought musicians were disgraceful. Dancing was considered undignified for a gentleman, especially if he was wearing a proper toga. In fact, when Romans wanted to call something ridiculous, they said it was like dancing in a toga. Musical Musical gods. The Romans believed that gods like Apollo gave music to humans. The Emperor Augustus revered the lyre-playing god from Greek mythology. Pan, the Greek god of shepherds, was another favourite of the Romans. He played simple wooden panpipes that are popular today. And the winner is... The Emperor Nero didn't really fiddle while Rome burned in 64 AD. Instead, he sang about the fall of Troy. Nero thought he was quite a good musician. He even traveled to Greece and entered musical competitions. Of course, as emperor, he always won. Musical instruments. Many instruments used in Rome were just like those played centuries earlier in other countries. Lyres, like guitar like cithara, flutes and sistrums came from Greece, Egypt and other lands around the Mediterranean. Double pipes, another import from Greece, were also popular, although they were hard to play. Roman soldiers often played a curved horn called a cornu, and used a type of trumpet for battle calls. And a run. Drums weren't very popular in Rome. To keep the beat, Romans preferred tambourines and cymbals. And we've reached the guides. Which means I don't have to read, we can just listen to them since they are audio. Oh, there it is. I zoned out there. Now, if you're curious about Gasper-Monique right there, she's one of the cases of one of the two cases of a guide not being from the time period. And again, I'll be right.
Okay, we're back. I'm back. We're going to start with Corpulus since I got them in alphabetical order. And of course the application's not responding. Oh jeez.
Hey, fetch me another cup and be quick about it. So, Flavius sent you to his old friend Corpulus about a contract? Oh, I fixed things all right, but I think you're a little confused. I don't work with my hands. I got started with Nero. He thought I was his right-hand man. I suppose the twit was right in a way. He was a stupid little puppet and I pulled his strings. I made him what he was, and if the fool had listened to me, he'd still be in the palace, instead of strumming his lyre in the underworld. He's probably still out of tune. Look, why don't you click me, and I'll tell you how things really get done in Rome. Nero never would have made it to the palace in the first place without my help. You see, his mother Agrippina was married to the Emperor Claudius, who'd already picked his own son to take over when he died. But Agrippina and we had an understanding. She wanted Nero on the throne fast, and I wanted more out of life than a job in the imperial treasury counting the emperor's money. We arranged a nice banquet to celebrate some silly anniversary. Poor old Claudius. My dear, he said, the mushrooms taste a little off tonight, don't you think? He didn't join us for dessert, if you know what I mean. With Claudius out of the way, Nero got down to business. I'll say this for the lad, he wasn't squeamish, but he never could go for the simple solution. Always wanted something flashy. Even when we decided it was time to take his mother out of the picture, he couldn't resist fooling around, concocting poisons, setting booby traps. He even had a boat rigged to fall apart at sea, hoping she'd drown. Things were getting out of hand until I paid some guards to finish her off. As emperor, Nero started out okay. Listened to advice, gave away a lot of grain, threw parties for the golden chariot set. He was really good at first, working the crowd, saying his lines like I taught him, looking a little bigger than life, but not too big. But he didn't pace himself, and he just couldn't resist showing off. See, I actually got to know our hero Nero down at the racetrack before he became emperor. The ponies are a little weakness of mine. Turns out he's not just laying down a few bets, he wants to race himself. Only he's not doing too well. But I make a few suggestions to the right people and suddenly he's lapping everybody. Sure, that one cost me a bit, but I think of it as an investment. Next thing I know, I'm having dinner at the palace, giving my favorite mushroom recipe to his mother. You had to have a pretty strong stomach to make it through one of Nero's banquets, let me tell you. No, the food was fine. Never had better flamingo flambe in my life. It was the music that put me off my feed. I suppose it's my fault that Nero thought he could sing and play the lyre. I figured it would keep him busy. Instead, he tortures everyone with Greek dithyrambs, and I used to think the screams from the cellar sounded bad. He even toured Greece, won every contest, and came home with a chest full of gold coins. Imagine my surprise. I think that trip pushed him over the edge. At first, nobody minded when he started ordering up statues of himself. It kept a lot of people busy. Work's work, right? But when he put up that big colossus of himself, well, that was too much. He wouldn't even listen to me on that one. He lost his sense of proportion, that's what it was. One day, while we're cooling off after a long spell in the steam room, he tells me he's going to build himself a golden palace. Where? I ask him. Rome's so crowded there's no room left for even a doghouse. There, he says, and he sweeps his hand across half of Rome. Well, to make a long story short, a big fire starts and burns for 9 days. It was my idea to blame the Christians. Then I arranged to buy up all the burned-out land. Nero designed the new mansion himself. To me, it looked like a Persian palace had landed on top of a Greek temple, but I'm no art critic. We even added a lake and vineyards, plus a few guest houses for trusted friends and advisors, like me. It wasn't such a bad deal for the city, either. We rebuilt all the streets, put up lots of new apartments, and I made a few new friends in the construction trades. Oh, those were the days, let me tell you. But the house turned into a major PR problem. Let me give you a piece of advice. Stay away from land deals. Anyway, our great Roman public turned nasty. Armies in the provinces wanted more money. We tried a few treason trials to scare him off, but nothing worked. In the end, Nero gets chased out of Rome and falls to pieces. Then, on his sword. At least, that's the story. Myself, I was busy making a few discreet donations to the Praetorian Guard. Speaking of which, I'm having lunch with a couple of important generals. Click me again, and maybe one of the other guides can teach you a few things. Where's my toga?
Right, that's Corpulus. Next up is Falco.
Hey, I've only got 2 hands. Stop acting like a bunch of barbarians. Look, you want a sausage? You gotta toss up a couple of those shiny little emperors first, huh? I'll be with you in a minute, pal. Keep your toga on. Oof, it's been busy at the big track before, but never like this. I'm Falco, the snack vendor. I work all over Rome, but race fans, they're just about my best customers. And you always see a lot of fine-looking fillies at the track, if you know what I mean. Hey, look, I gotta go get another tray of sausages. Click me if you want to come along. I'm going up to the cheap seats next. By this time of day, those folks are eating out of my hand. Besides, the senators and their wives down in the front rows, they won't give you the time of day. Get this. They think it's bad manners to eat in the stands. But let me tell you, you want to find out about bad table manners, just work one of their banquets. Like one of my buddies did a while back. Oof, the things he saw. Well, let's just say I know now why they always put a vomitorium in those mansions. And believe me, I thought I'd seen it all. See, I worked the Colosseum too. Get out of here. You were there last week for the big show with all the boats? Hey, wasn't that something? All that blood and gore from morning till dark. Yeah, that's what you think, all right. But you know, for some reason, gladiator fans really go for those little meat pies. I guess around here there's nothing like a killing to get your appetite going. Like I said, your basic Roman's got a pretty strong stomach. Most of us regular folks get by on a lot of bread and this porridge stuff that my mother always tried to cram down my throat. Lately, though, a lot of people have been asking for more exotic stuff. Yeah, I guess some of them have heard the rumors about the feasts up at the Emperor's Palace. I tell you, if I could get my hands on a flock of flamingos, whoo, I could retire next week. Anyways, have you ever been down inside the Colosseum where the gladiators wait? Us vendors, we have to go down there to pick up supplies. I mean, as you can see, I stay in pretty good shape myself. But those guys, of course, most of them don't stick around too long, so even climbing those stairs all day looks okay to me. Yeah, well, it could be a lot worse. How about having to clean up after the animals they throw at the gladiators? Bears, lions, ostriches. See, I got to talking with one of those guys a couple of months back after they brought in a load of hippos from Egypt. Trust me, you don't want to know. Let's just say he didn't smell like a lotus blossom, okay? As a matter of fact, I headed straight for the baths. There's always a crowd in there. I usually work a couple of hours, then I take a dip myself. If you keep your ears open in the steam room, you can pick up a lot of useful information about what's going on around town. And the ladies, oh, hello. Yeah, the theater's not bad for business either, especially when the show's lousy and the crowd wants to throw food at the actors. Nobody cares if they're getting leftovers, except the actors, of course. I picked up a few good lines, too. I'm gonna try them out next time I'm down at the Forum. The streets? Sure, I worked them for years when I was a kid, but that's a tough way to make a living. During the day, you can hardly move, and I can't make myself heard over the racket. At night? Forget about it. If you don't get run over by a wagon, a dogs will probably whack you. Look, I gotta get back to work before the last race, and I got a hot date tonight. Click me again to have somebody else show you around. Ciao.
That was Falco, and next up is Farah.
Shh, we have to be very quiet. Everyone's still asleep. My name's Farah. I'm one of the slaves in this house. I have to sneak around in the morning because the only chance I get to read is real early, before everyone gets up. Nobody's supposed to find out I've been teaching myself to read, okay? I've been borrowing from Gaius's collection of scrolls. He's the oldest son of my owner. School's for citizens' sons. Slave girls are just supposed to do what they're told. But I'm not gonna be a slave forever. I want to learn things. If you want to know what my life is really like, click me and I'll tell you all about it. We can talk out here. I wish I could remember more of what it was like in Persia where I grew up. Some of the stories I've read said it was once a great empire, almost as mighty as Rome is today. But I was just a little girl when Roman troops captured our land. I don't remember much about my poor parents or our farm. A slave trader brought me back here. I was really afraid when he told me he'd sell me in Rome. He said young girls always fetch a good price. Farah, do my nails. Farah, fetch my stola. Farah, you've made my hair look like a bird's nest. All day long my owner's wife yells at me. Doesn't matter how hard I try, she's never satisfied. But it could be a lot worse. Other girls tell me how their owners beat them. One even showed me scars from when she got stuck with hairpins just because she didn't fix the lady's hair just right. I don't know how she puts up with it. At least I'll have a chance to earn my freedom a few years from now when I turn 20. Working in this house really isn't too bad. We all go to Pompeii in the summer because it gets so hot and humid here in Rome. Everybody relaxes a little there, and I don't get bossed around so much. I even get to go to the beach, and there's a beautiful theater. Did you know there was a big earthquake there a few years ago? But nobody seems to care. They just enjoy the seafood and cool breezes. Maybe I'll try to live in Pompeii after I'm freed. Of course, I might stay in Rome. Slaves can become part of the family after they're given their freedom. It's a lot more comfortable in this house than in those apartments you see all over town. I share a room with other slave girls, but at least we have some quiet and a little space to ourselves. My owners rent out the front of the house to shopkeepers. It's sure convenient when I have to get things. And take a peek in here. The atrium pool keeps our well full, so I hardly ever have to go out to collect water. Here's the family shrine. My master's pretty tolerant. He says as long as I respect Roman traditions, I can still worship Mithras, the sun god. It's mainly for soldiers. Women can't even watch the rituals, but it's part of my homeland. Besides, I don't understand those strange Roman gods like Jupiter and Minerva. To tell you the truth, I don't think anyone in the family really believes in them either. But every morning they make offerings. I guess they think it's important to uphold traditions. Oh look, the sun's coming up. I've got to get going. The shops will be open soon. I'm supposed to get everything we need for a big dinner party tonight. Most of the things I need are right around the corner, but let's go down to the forum where there's a farmer's market. Maybe we'll get to hear a debate. These Romans sure love to talk. But you know, I still don't understand why the Senate even bothers to vote. The Emperor always gets his way. Let's see, I'm supposed to get chicken, fish, and a lot of olives. Yesterday I saw a sign on the butcher's wall for fresh pork. Maybe I'll make that special Persian sauce that everybody likes. It's a lot better than the fish gunk that most people dump all over everything. You wouldn't believe some of the stuff I've seen my owners eat. Even mice. None of us slaves would even touch the leftovers that night. If I make a good meal and mend her dresses, I might get to leave the house and go to the theater. I hear they're putting on a play by Terence, and Paris has the starring role. He's so handsome. Of course, slaves don't get to sit very close to the stage. But maybe if I sneak around back, he'll notice me after the play. After all, he started out as a slave himself. Uh-oh, it sounds like my owners are up. They always argue first thing in the morning. I better get breakfast ready, and you better get along yourself. Click me to start another tour. Wale.
Next up is Gastronomique Gourmand.
Bonjour! Bonjour! Come, join me, Gastronomique Gourmand, as today we prepare the most fantastic meal. Different dishes from all around the world. You had better be hungry. It is always best to start with the bread. Oui, just my opinion, but then I run the show. Let's do a nice round loaf from Mesopotamia, where with the growing of the grain, civilized cooking really began. Of course, the whole place was so hot it was like an oven itself, no? But I love to knead the dough. Well, while we wait for the bread to rise, click me again and we'll start the real cooking. Premiere! Oh, Pardon? First, we make some hors d'oeuvres, yes? You think mice, they have been cooked everywhere possible, no? Well, that is why I am the world-famous chef, and you are learning from me. Here, I show you a little trick from the Romans. If you can find really fresh mice, not something the cat drags in, just saute in a little honey, and voila! The perfect beginning, and so easy to prepare ahead of time. Next, I start the first course. I think we do something simple but elegant from Egypt. It is so easy there to find fresh fish and duck along the Nile. And perhaps here we can also get a few vegetables for the main course. Ah, everything looks so good I cannot decide. Let's do both the duck and the fish. We go on a diet tomorrow, eh? If the Egyptian fish is not available, I think you'll never go wrong with octopus or squid from Greece. The fishermen there, they have been doing this for centuries, and they know just where to find the best of these shy but oh so tasty creatures. Personally, I like the first course to have a little zip. You? I'm not so sure. Here in India, a great place for spices. We find something for every palate. Now you understand why Alexander the Great wanted to come so far, eh? No. That one is really hot. Well, let's hurry back to the kitchen. I'm sure we can find something to put out that little flambe you started on your tongue, eh? Now we begin the main course. First, get the hippopotamus. You may need some help, but believe me, you have never tasted anything like this before. But a little advice. Most people, they just stuff it in the oven and walk away. That will not do. I insist you tenderize it first. It's a little work, certainly. But your guests will thank you, I am sure. And it is really quite fantastic for a big dinner party. It serves about 200. With the roast hippo, I always like to have the noodles. The best, they come from China, where they were invented so many years ago. If Gastromonique say it once, I say it 1,000 times. Use the original ingredients wherever possible. Just drop them quickly in a little boiling water and presto. Now, what to drink? Très important. I think with the hippo, a nice full-bodied Greek wine will do nicely. You can decide for yourself how much water to mix in. Moi, I think 1, 2 drops, that's more than enough. You may think the Aztecs, they are brutal, no? But they give us one fantastic gift that is just the perfect way to finish our meal. I speak, of course, of the chocolate. You think, I suppose, it comes from the Alps? So many people, they make that mistake. Oh, it is so sad, but I see we have run out of time. Perhaps before you go, you can help me lift the hippo out of the oven. No? Well, I manage myself. Click me to choose another guide on your journey. Au revoir.
Yeah, that was gastronomique. Next up is Marcus.
Hi, I'm Marcus. I live on a farm north of Rome with my father, who's a retired centurion, my mother, and a couple of sisters. I'm just a kid, but on March 17th, I turn 14, and then I'll be a man. Our farm is a great place to grow up, even though we have lots of chores. My father got the farm as a reward for more than 20 years of service in the Roman army. We have a nice house all to ourselves. It's not big, but I get my own room. There's also an atrium where my friends and I can cool off after one of my father's lessons in how to use a sword and shield. Things aren't so comfortable for people in Rome. Click me and I'll show you around. Dad says a lot of people are lucky just to find a 2- or 3-room apartment in big cities like Rome. Ooh, sounds like I'd have to share a room with a couple of my stupid sisters. Mom says some people can't even cook in their apartments because they'd probably burn down the whole neighborhood. Life out here may be more comfortable, but it can get kind of boring. City kids get to visit huge public baths, go to gladiator fights, and watch victory parades at the Forum. I just watch herds of cows come and go. Most people don't think of farmers much until they run out of bread. Dad says Rome is full of people who spend all day just passing around papyrus scrolls and making long speeches. The only stains on their hands come from octopus ink. He says it's the people out on the farms that really keep the empire going. I like working outdoors, helping my dad grow herbs for medicines. Dad heard a lot about that stuff in the army. He says he even learned a thing or two from some barbarian prisoners. Some of our herbs end up with doctors, but a lot of people make their own medicines out of cabbage, garlic, and other stuff we grow. Personally, I'd rather eat a whole cart full of cabbage than take one sip of that stuff they sell in Rome. It's made out of snake guts. I'm pretty lucky for a farm boy. I got sent to school for a while, just enough to learn to read and write. I'm sure glad I don't have to go anymore. School is just a noisy room in town, and everybody hates the mean old teacher, Flaccus. You had to sit for hours scratching lessons on a wax tablet. And then we had to memorize Greek and Latin poetry, scrolls full of it. It was arma virumque cano, day in, day out, ad nauseum. I learned more interesting stuff from all the traders who come down the road than I ever learned in school. One old craftsman told me about Britain, and another guy showed me a mummy mask from Egypt. Sometimes we can even see a whole legion on the march. And once, a long line of cages came by full of bears. Dad said they were headed for a big show at the Colosseum. Speaking of which, we better get moving if we're gonna get to Rome before dark. I guess I fell asleep for a while, but that smell and the noise sure woke me up quick. And people think the cow pasture stinks. I'm not sure I'm gonna like Rome after all. There's so many people you can hardly move. Everybody's always yelling, and they talk so fast, I can hardly understand a word they're saying. My old teacher Flaccus would whack 'em across the head if he heard how they butcher their Latin. Wow, we sold everything so fast we get to go to the chariot races at the Circus Maximus. I've never seen so many people in one place. Look, there goes the first race. Dad's favorite team, the Greens, is in first place. Whoa, did you see that guy get flipped out of his chariot? The horses must have dragged him half a lap. This is so amazing. I'm almost too excited to eat. But the sausages they make here are really good. Want a bite? Hey, what's going on? Everybody's standing and cheering, Hail Caesar! It's Nero, the Emperor! Here, stand in front of me where you can get a better look. He's really kind of short, isn't he? He looked a lot younger and bigger in that statue we saw on the way to the stadium. Hey, he's actually going to race. I'll bet he always wins. Hey, do you think we can sneak off to the Forum? I want to tell you about my big surprise. For my birthday tomorrow, we're coming down here to the Forum to watch Marcus Antonius Valens march in triumph through one of the big arches. He captured an entire barbarian tribe, and all the prisoners are going to be on display. Dad says it's going to be amazing. The general paints his face red, gets to wear gold and purple, and a victory crown. There's going to be a band and a ceremony at Jupiter's temple. Let's meet back here first thing in the morning, okay? But there's lots more to see until then. Click me again to take another tour. Bye!
And the last of the Roman guides would be Rufus.
Hut, hut, hut. That's all I hear all day. Unless our centurion starts barking orders for another stupid drill. As if we haven't been through all this 1,000 times. I'm Rufus, one of Caesar's legionnaires heading for battle. But today I feel more like a mule, climbing hill after hill in Gaul. My sandals are almost worn out. Plus look at all the stuff I have to carry. Woolen cloak, shield, armor, sword, daggers, spades, stakes, mess kit, and rations for 2 weeks. Look, we're not supposed to talk to civilians while we're on patrol, but click me and I'll tell you a thing or two about life in the Roman army. To begin with, I'd much rather be home on my family's farm. I thought all those chores were hard, until I reported for duty with my legion. I'll have to serve for at least 20 years before I get my own piece of land, assuming I live long enough to enjoy it. The army's changed a lot since the early days. Used to be, for weapons, we regular guys just picked up whatever we could find. Now we're paid a salary, we get standard gear and training. Of course, you don't want to screw up. The centurions have been known to execute every 10th man if anyone tries to desert. But I guess the systems work pretty well. We destroy almost every enemy we meet, and Rome rules practically the entire world. As far as I can tell anyway. And we don't just fight. We've built a lot of stuff you probably heard about. Roads, bridges, aqueducts. I think we spend a lot more time on construction projects than we do fighting. You know, after building so many forts, if I ever get my own farm, I'll know how to fix it up really good. Hey, just between you and me, some of our generals are just politicians who don't seem to know how to fight. But Julius Caesar, he's the bravest guy I've ever seen. He leads us into battle himself, no matter how outnumbered we are. He never seems to get tired. His red cloak is always out ahead of us, crossing streams, climbing hills. He sends messengers ahead to announce our coming. Then he gets where we're going before the messengers. Caesar's led us all over this miserable, cold country we call Gaul. We're supposed to conquer the whole territory. I say leave it to the barbarians. But I guess Caesar wants to head home in triumph. I just hope next time he decides to conquer someplace warm and dry. Now we're closing in on Vercingetorix, the Gallic prince. His troops are high on the hill of Alesia, inside a fort they built. Now, a lot of the guys think the barbarians are just animals, but I don't know. Some of them seem pretty clever to me, and they fight like maniacs. Once they came running out of the woods. Their hair was all white like snow, and they painted their bodies blue. Scared the daylights out of half my legion. It was all the centurion could do to make us hold our lines. We had a lot of wounded that day, let me tell you. I even got a couple of scars myself. But I didn't go anywhere near the doctors. From what I've seen, your chances are better on the battlefield than in those operating rooms. Besides, I know a few things about herbs and medicines. We used to grow a lot of that stuff back on the farm. Anyway, Caesar has prepared us for this battle like nothing I've ever seen. The guys say barbarian reinforcements are on the way, so we built 2 walls with spikes and moats. One's supposed to stop the barbarians from the fort if they charge down the hill. The one my unit worked on, it'll block the reinforcements if they attack us from behind. Now, some of the guys think we're in a trap, caught on low ground between 2 armies, but knowing Caesar, I figure we're setting a trap for the barbarians. Well, it looks like we're about to move out. You'd better get moving yourself or you'll be a new recruit in the Roman army. Click me again to have someone else show you around. Wally?
Right, guess I'll just check my schedule for today. Alright, I think that's enough for today. I'm Brian Croydragon signing out. Stay Shrey.